The reason I liked photography so much was, number one, the magic of the appearance of an image in wet liquid. I mean, one moment the paper is white, the next moment there is an image. It comes from nowhere. I mean, I know where it came from, but it's magic, you see. Ann Fulcino, who was the public relations gal for RCA Victor, when she called, she said, "Al, could you be available on the 17th of March? We'd like you to cover the Tommy Jimmy Dorsey stage show at Studio 50." I said, "Terrific, Ann. Tommy Dorsey, he's a hero of mine." And she said, "No, we don't want you to photograph Tommy Dorsey necessarily. We want you to photograph Elvis Presley." And then there'd be that 30 seconds of silence. And I'd say, "Ann, Elvis who?" I love this picture. I really do. It's so typical. It's like a Hopper in my estimation, the painter. And I call this picture Grilled Cheese 20 Cents. And Elvis is showing the unknown groupie for the day the script to the Steve Allen show. She's going to accompany him for the rest of the day. Don't ask me where she was from, because I don't know. The guess was that she came from Atlanta, Georgia, on a dare to come up to Richmond to see Elvis, but I can't verify that story. Elvis was trying to relax her all day. I mean, he liked the girl, she was pretty, but she was uptight. So what did Elvis do? He had see, here he's cuddling her. That's one means of getting her relaxed. Then there's another means where he is choking her in the car. Later on, he decided to muss up her hair because she had this hairspray, and he didn't like it. And then what else would he do? Occasionally he would come within about 2 inches of her face and go, "Ah!" You know, sort of shout at her. So I got sort of sidetracked by following some of the Jordanaires changing their clothes, and then Elvis disappears on me. And I'm saying to myself, "Al, what kind of journalist are you? Your main character has disappeared. Where's your story?" And I walk down this staircase here, and I find these two people at the end of this narrow hallway, and it's Elvis and the girl. And I say to myself, I've got to get closer. You know, Cornell Kappa once said, if your pictures are boring, then it's because you're not close enough. Well, I wanted to get closer. I got up on this handrail here, and this is the results from going on the handrail. All of this is available darkness photography. There's a 50-watt bulb above Elvis's head and her head, and there's this tiny little window here, and that's it. And then this I call Hold Me Tight, and this I call Whisper or something. But I still wasn't satisfied. I wanted to get to this landing down here. You had no fear about you disturbing him because he was like laser focused. I mean, a bomb could have gone off and it would have been hard for him to be distracted. He was like zeroing in. So then I'm on the other side here, and just as I set up, she says to Elvis, "I'll bet you can't kiss me, Elvis." And she sticks out her tongue. Well, then, now that was a challenge for Elvis. So what he does was he overshoots the mark and he bends her nose. But does that dismay him? No. He backs up very gently and he comes in for a landing, and bingo. The two tongues touch. The whole thing takes about 1/10 of a second, maybe a second tops. And that's the end of that. That was just his nature. He had an incredible charisma. And I mean, I felt it. And everybody who got anywhere near him, he was very outgoing. And he wasn't intellectual tricky at all. He was just very honest. Elvis is on the train. He had just recorded these 3 songs, but Two of them became his third and fourth gold record. You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog was the third, and Don't Be Cruel was the fourth. Here he's listening to it over and over and over and over again on the way down to his home. And he's listening on this inexpensive little record player. And here, I mean, while the other musicians are horsing around, while Colonel Parker is somewhere else, Elvis keeps listening and listening and listening. He's a serious guy. I asked him, why does he listen? Why are you listening to it on this tiny little machine with a terrible speaker? And you've just heard it yesterday on a 14-inch speaker in a studio. Beautiful reproduction. He says, Al, this is the way my fans hear my music. That's the way I want to hear it. Now, what I asked him to do for me was nothing. First of all, you have to know your craft. And if you're a photographer or a cameraman in this case, if you know your craft, and if you have any kind of curiosity and a sense about people, if you just observe them, and if they're involved in what they're doing, and they're truly involved, then it's so easy to take good pictures, because they're focused inwardly on what they're doing. They're not focused on what's going on here. And so whatever it is comes out from within. The title of this picture is No Gas in the Tank. He couldn't figure out why the motorcycle wouldn't start. And the answer was no gas in the tank. And they got a jerry can with some gasoline. Then the motorcycle turned over and it worked. And then he drove around the block a few times. It shows you how you need some luck as a photographer. You set your frame. You've got your crowd, you've got your performer, you're setting a frame, and it's a fairly dull situation, but maybe something will happen. And then, sure enough, somebody, probably a young girl, with a box brownie, shoots off a flash picture, which is absolutely synchronized to my shutter, my aperture. So as my aperture's open, her flash lights up the whole back as if it was in sync with me. It wasn't planned, it's an accident, and this here is a aberration and a flare inside my shutter area, so that even though Kodak tells you never to do that, it made the picture. That sort of brought some life. I call it starburst. When he left for Germany on the USS Randall, that was the last day I saw Elvis alive. And after that day, I was doing some work for a fan magazine that day. But after that day, I didn't get a phone call for 19 years for an Elvis Presley photograph. And then the day he died, phone rang. That's 30 years ago. And the phone really hasn't stopped ringing since.